Okay, let's go straight back to retired CIA analyst and whistleblower David MacMichael. This is a short segment, so let's get right to it. We appreciate you joining us, sir. We're seeing a near identical repeat of the propaganda used on Iraq 8 years ago, again with Iran. Can you speak to this?
Yeah. This has been going on for a very long time, and I call it the creation of a false crisis involving Iran and its nuclear program. Now, to put it in the shortest way possible, Iran, which is an original signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty back in the 1970s under the Shah's government, of course, when the United States was very eager to assist Iran in developing a nuclear power industry, has been charged since the overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of the Islamic Republic with the intention to not simply to develop a nuclear power industry, but that is a cover for its desire to produce nuclear weapons, which, of course, is prohibited by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. Well, these accusations have been made for a very long time. The Iranians have insisted, as a matter of fact, their chief spiritual leader, and I have my problems with the Sharia types who dominate a certain aspect of Iranian public life. They have emphasized, even in that period, that Islamic law prohibits the manufacture or use of these weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, and so forth. But in any case, it's been an article of faith, excuse the expression, coming both from certain elements in our foreign policy establishment, and especially from Israel and its adherents and followers in the United States. I think we can use the AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee, is the symbol of this, to insist that Iran is deliberately pursuing this creation of nuclear weapons, which represents an existential threat to Israel, particularly, and subsequently, of course, to the United States and its interests in the Middle East. Now, I should emphasize that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is charged under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to investigate and the nuclear programs of every country in the world, consistently found that Iran was not engaged in or intending the production of nuclear weapons. 3 years ago, there was a national intelligence estimate. These are products produced by the National Intelligence Council, the grouping of all the United States intelligence agencies, which found that despite the uproar that Iran had ceased any nuclear weapons programs back in 2003 and had not reconstituted them. Now, I know a little bit about these types of programs. Brazil, even Sweden, Argentina, other countries have them. As a matter of fact, any country which has a significantly sized military has nuclear weapons programs in the sense that studies are done within their military.
David MacMichael, we've got a break. We're back in 70 seconds. We'll continue where we left off. Stay with us. AP, Reuters, French news agency, they've all got the same headline. Israel has 8 days to hit Iran's nuclear site. That's the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Bolton. They've got Jeffrey Goldberg, the admitted Israel operative, running around saying we've got to do it at the New Atlantic. All of this is happening. And we're talking to a former senior CIA analyst who also worked at the National Intelligence Council, who found 3 years ago that Iran was a decade away from a nuke and that they'd suspended their program. And, of course, that's what the council had said about Iraq's WMDs that had been suspended in the early 90s. But they just created a new office in the Pentagon to put out disinfo. So we're seeing the same thing now. Sir, ominous war clouds gathering. From your years of experience, it looks like they're trying to sell an attack on Iran now. And what would come of that if there is an attack?
Well, I mean, if there were an attack, and of course what kind of an attack, and I think what most people have in mind, reflecting the rhetoric coming out of Tel Aviv, is that this would be an Israeli aerial attack on Iraq's nuclear installations, and that the United States, that this could not happen without either an open or a tacit approval by the United States government, because the aircraft would have to overfly areas controlled by the United States, Iraq, for example. And so this has become a major issue, as you point out. The one thing you didn't point out, of course, is that as of yesterday, the long-planned Russian designed and assisted nuclear power plant at Bushehr in Iran was open because the Russians delivered to the plant the nuclear fuel to get it running. It has not yet been installed, and that's what gets to this 8-day thing that's been raised. It will take approximately another week to get all the fuel in there, and it's being argued by Bolton and others that the plant must be destroyed before the fuel is in there, because if the fuel is there and then it is bombed, then you set up a Chernobyl type situation with radioactive material spreading all over the whole Middle East, which is kind of suicidal for anybody that gets involved in this. This has been magnified, if you will, and publicized very highly by this article by Jeffrey Goldberg, whom you rightly describe as basically an Israeli asset, if you will, in the United States, in the Atlantic Monthly, which showed it really is focused as much on our current United States government, the Barack Obama administration, that the only way the United States can really prevent Israel from carrying out such an attack is by itself taking a more direct military, paramilitary, economic role in forcing the Iranian government to abandon its current nuclear power program. So this, as I say, this all comes about, but I think from my perspective, one of the main factors to consider here is that this elevating, and it's been pretty high profile for quite a while.
I'll tell you what, sorry to interrupt. Let's hit that key point straight ahead with our final segment with our guest, and Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, coming up. Well, he was a senior CIA analyst, of course, in the Marine Corps before that, in intelligence. And he's a famous, well-known whistleblower who exposed fake intelligence back in the 80s. And it's the same story, just on a bigger scale. If you look at even the hawks in government, they admit that an attack on Iran, and they published 3 years ago some of the attack plans, hundreds of sites, their navy, their power plants, their bridges, their infrastructure being annihilated, a crime against humanity. Our government has overthrown Iran in '53. It's done all sorts of horrible things to them, covert operations. Bush, Cy Hirsch 6 years ago reported on this. 2 years after that, 4 years ago, the White House put out a press release saying, yes, we're running 4 different sectarian groups, 3 of them Al-Qaeda related, Wahhabists connected out of Saudi Arabia, inside Iran, sabotaging and staging terror attacks. I mean, this is admitted. It's like Bush 2 months ago came out and said, yeah, I ordered torture, and I'd order it again, but he sent people to prison that followed his memos from John Yoo and from Alberto Gonzales, the Attorney General. It's so criminal. And now with Obama, it's continuing, and we left off with the former, IDF prison guard, Jeffrey Goldberg, writing in the Atlantic that America, the United States, needs to attack Iran. And most analysts think it could trigger World War III, but regardless, it's going to double or triple oil prices, a global jihad, not fake terror, real attacks are going to begin. And I think, sir, that they want to invoke this clash of civilizations. They want to stir up the Muslim hornet's nest in Central Asia, into the Middle East, and then into Eastern Europe and the United States. I mean, specifically, what do you think the grand design here is? What is AIPAC looking for? What are the hawks at the Pentagon looking for? And do you believe they are moving towards a green light on an attack on Iran?
Well, I would agree with your last point. They are moving toward it. The likelihood of giving this green light is greater than it was, let's say, a year and a half ago, when especially the Israelis were in some sort of a panic trying to figure out what the Obama administration's actual policy in the Middle East would be. And they've been, I think they've been relieved. I think they have the very strong elements directly within the White House. I need merely say Rahm Emanuel, and there are several others very close in the this so-called national security.
Admitted member of the Israeli military. White House chief of staff.
Emanuel is, he's right there as basically an Israeli representative in the White House, and he's very hawkish and so forth. Now, that said, I'd like to refer your listeners, our listeners at this point, to the comment which Martin Indyk, the former U.S. ambassador to Israel and currently a vice president of the Brookings Institution here in Washington, commented on the Goldberg article and came up with the conclusion that the United States was more likely than Israel to bomb Iran. In other words, if in fact the United States determines that Israel would go ahead with this and that the United States would be put in a bad position, if you will, by moving effectively to prevent Israel from doing it, then the United States would be more likely to take the action to destroy the installations at Bushehr and show its determination. And this would really be, Obama's complete transformation into the new Bush in there. And I think there is that Indyk certainly knows the region. Makes a certain amount of sense in coming to this conclusion. The point I was going to make before we went to break last time, which makes this whole situation less predictable and more chancy than it was before. This is happening in the middle of the run-up to the congressional elections